Abibi Fahoudier and blessings to the ancestors. It's D1 here with a new video, here to discuss several topics related to the 2024 presidential elections and the lack of supposed democracy in this country. As you can see by the video title, I'm going to be explaining why I'm not voting and further back up my stance that the West, and in particular the United States, is a phantom democracy. Before we get started, I wanted to plug my new single I produced with a fellow Pan-Africanist, the brother Olu Ase of Houston, Texas, who provided a dope freestyle over one of my beats. The goal I have with these musical Pan-African collaborations is to create a canvas to insert the historical and political topics we discuss on this channel into the music to raise the consciousness of Black African peoples in the diaspora and in the continent. So if you're interested, subscribe to my mailing list below, where I'll provide updates on periodic releases when we drop. With that being said, let's get started with today's video and give a general background of the 2024 election. Now, up until July 2024, the presumptive nominees of the presidential race were Joe Biden of the Democrats and Donald Trump of the Republicans. Ever since his 2024 defeat, Trump has been the base of the Republicans despite his numerous legal and criminal charges. He enjoys broad support amongst the GOP electorate and base, to the ire of the Republican establishment. On the Democratic side, Joe Biden's mixed record as president, specifically in relation to the focus of this video, the material needs of Black America, has been largely ignored outside of symbolic gestures, and has become gradually dissatisfied with the historical malignment of the Democratic establishment to their loyal Black voter base. However, the key issue of Biden's health has been brought up over the last couple of years and has been on a noticeable decline in public, thus bringing in questions about his ability to run again for another term. I personally noticed this since 2022, that his cognitive decline has gotten worse, particularly over 2023. Even though I've been largely ignoring the domestic political circus that's been going on, I've always had a question in my mind: in a non-pandemic situation, how would Biden run a campaign going back as far as years ago, when his gaffes and his mental slip-ups were beginning to become noticeable to the public despite mainstream media covering for him? I got my answer in June 2024, where suspiciously, I noticed that the presidential debates were being held rather early, and in fact, if I remember correctly, after the NBA Finals. Even back in the day, when I was non-political and a non-radical, the mere fact that the debate was scheduled in June, when it's typically held in fall during September and October, was particularly odd to me, especially and specifically before both of the major parties' conventions, which was to be held in July and August, where respective delegates officially nominate their presidential candidates. I remember texting the brother historian Dwayne Omowale at the time about this oddity, which he agreed with me. I give this general background because my theory in the following unfolding events that happened in July may be considered conspiracy theory, but I'm here to give you my point of view. I am of the view that the Democratic establishment, before their primaries, which ironically, undemocratically, shut out any competition for Biden, the elites and donors were already aware of Biden's cognitive decline and was worried about in a general election matchup with Trump, Biden would lose due to his already poor approval ratings, and routine gaffes and slip-ups may hurt him as he further campaigns publicly. So in my theory, the debate was moved up earlier as a way to embarrass Biden, who refused calls for him to step down prior, to apply more public pressure to force him off the presidential ticket by allowing his clear health decline to be displayed in front of the American public in prime time. In the short run, this didn't work, as Biden was defiant against stepping down throughout the post-June debate going into July. The next event to take place, in my opinion, was the last Hail Mary attempt by the ruling elite to save Biden and his so-called democracy. In July, an assassination attempt on Trump occurred at one of his rallies, where a young Muzungu fired several shots at Trump from a nearby rooftop outside of the rally venue. Trump was injured but not killed in the attack. To me, that was likely organized by the ruling elite to effectively neutralize a path for a Trump presidency, which would help Biden to a certain degree in the campaign and face a weaker Republican candidate and a safer path to victory. Once this failed, reports of resumed pressure from the Democratic establishment and its donors, including Barack Obama himself, openly calling for Biden to drop out. Of course, all of this is my speculation or theory given my studies of geopolitics and my understanding of who are the economic power players behind the scene who control the government and political system. With that being said, the reason I give this general recap of these recent political events to provide context of why I'm not voting in this year's election, and probably won't for the years to come, and to tackle the main topic of this video of the supposed claim of the United States, or by the extension, the Western world, being democratic, which in my view is not technically. The reason I'm not voting or haven't voted in the last almost 10 years is rooted in my belief that the United States is not a true democracy or representative of its people. Rather, it is a republic that has what I call a phantom or covert oligarchy disguised as a democracy, where the corporate capitalist elite are the true arbiters of economic and political power. Through the power of Wall Street and its banks, these oligarchs, since the founding of the United States, have used their private control over the economy and the political state through corporations, private foundations, and etc., that exert power discreetly through campaign donations, political action committees, or PACs, therefore influencing public policy that shapes and increases their overall power over the countries. As I've stated before in my Western power structure video, Carroll Quigley depicts how this power arrangement influences government, stating,
"The substantive financial powers of the world are in the hands of these investment bankers, also called international or merchant bankers, who remain largely behind the scenes in their own and unincorporated private banks. These banks formed a system of international cooperation and national dominance which was more private, more powerful and more secret than other agents in the central banks. This dominance of investment bankers was based on their control over the flows of credit and investment funds in their own countries, and throughout the world they can dominate the financial and industrial systems of their own countries by their influence over the flow of current funds through bank loans, the discount rate, and did rediscounting of commercial debts. They could dominate governments by their control over current government loans and the play international exchanges."
In the modern day, this economic reality results in a monopolistic two-party political system where corporate donors across varying ideological spectrum compete amongst each other to fund candidates on both sides of the aisle to achieve their private interests. An example cited in a Cambridge study summarizing the discrepancy in voters' demands of policy change and the elite donors' desired changes, stating, "The preferences of economic elites have more independent impact upon policy change than the preferences of the average citizens do. To be sure, this does not mean that ordinary citizens always lose out. They fairly often get the policies that they favor, but only because those policies happen to also be preferred by the economically elite citizens who wield the actual influence." So in closing, elections, in my opinion, outside of the local level, are largely instruments of the ruling elites to get political permission to rule via the illusion of popular participation by giving the citizens the worst of options that the capitalist elites sponsor through donations, those of whom, after you elect them, will continue the status quo and will not do anything of substance policy-wise. Everything I stated in this video can also be applied politically to Western Europe as well, regarding their political system and the Western neo-control of Africa. When it comes to Black folks here in America, the best political solution is the same that Malcolm offered us approximately 60 years ago. For those of us who want to participate in the political system, I believe his solution to build a Black independent voter bloc, as he suggested, which will allow us each election cycle to leverage the Black vote as a minority within a majority to swing elections in exchange for political concessions at the local and national level. There are limitations to this idea that I explained before, with the economic influence of capitalist elite being a barrier to raise enough money to execute this plan nationally. But from my point of view, is the most logical path if you are a Black person who plans to participate in voting. Until something similar that is organized, I'm likely not voting anytime soon locally or in the national elections. So in this year's election, while everyone is arguing about if Kamala is a so-called Black woman, which she's not, or arguing for a racist demagogue like Trump, just know that nothing of political significance is going to change outside of revolution or civil war. With that being said, expect my next video in the next 2 weeks or so, where I'll be discussing the recent activities in the motherland and my concerns about the Sahel region and potential union. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and to my website's mailing list for new releases and drops. Until next time, Abibi Fahudiye and blessings to the ancestors.
22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. They see that the whites are so evenly divided that every time they vote, the race is so close they have to go back and count the votes all over again. And which means that any block, any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You're the one who put the present Democratic administration in Washington, D.C. The whites were evenly divided. It was the fact that you threw 80% of your votes behind the Democrats that put the Democrats in the White House. When you see this, you can see that the Negro vote is the key factor. And despite the fact that you are in a position to be the determining factor, what do you get out of it? The Democrats have been in Washington, D.C. only because of the Negro vote. They've been down there 4 years. And all other legislation they wanted to bring up, they brought it up and gotten it out of the way, and now they bring up you. And now they bring up you. You put them first and they put you last. Because you're a chump. A political chump.